5 million francs. A fountain pen scratches across a mahogany desk in Marseille, signing a bounty for a phantom. It wasn't just a manhunt. It was a billion-dollar confession of total incompetence. How did the Third Reich, a machine built to catalog every heartbeat in Europe, surrender to a woman in a silk dress? Why did a system of iron and steel collapse against a target they had already held the door open for? But history got it wrong. While the Gestapo narrowed their eyes at every man with a suspicious gait, Nancy Wake was sitting in their favorite cafes, sipping vermentino and hiding microfilm in her hem. They ignored her. They mocked her because she was just a socialite with expensive lipstick, a creature of high society rather than high stakes. Why did the powerful system ignore the only tactic that could save them? The answer wasn't in the classified vaults, but in the hands of the white mouse. Marseille, August 1942. The air in the city is thick, a humid soup of sea salt and the metallic tang of fear. Inside the smoke-filled offices of the Gestapo, the atmosphere is different. Here, it smells of ozone, floor wax, and the quiet, scratching sound of fountain pens recording the names of the dead. On a mahogany desk sits a dossier. It is thick, weathered, and marked with a name that has become a curse word among the high command, the white mouse. To the men in the gray uniforms, she is a tactical impossibility. They have created a system of absolute control, a grid of checkpoints, identity cards, and informers designed to catch a whisper. Yet, this phantom moves through the grid as if it were made of shadows. They believe they are hunting a professional, a saboteur trained in the dark arts of the British Secret Service. They are looking for a soldier, and that is the fatal flaw in their logic. The system of occupation relies on a specific mechanical certainty. We can call it the gatekeeper's logic. The input: a civilian approaches a barricade. The action: the soldier demands papers, cross-referencing a physical description against a list of known agitators. The fatal flaw: the Nazi mind is a rigid machine. It is programmed to look for the threat-type men of military age, people with calloused hands, or those who avoid eye contact. Output: Nancy Wake walks right through the center of the machine because she doesn't look like a threat. She looks like the one thing a Nazi officer is trained to ignore. She is an Australian-born journalist who once prowled the bars of pre-war Paris, a woman who understands the psychology of the powerful man better than any general. She isn't hiding in the sewers. She is sitting in the sun-drenched cafes of the Vieux Port, wearing a tailored suit and a dash of expensive lipstick, sipping a chilled vermentino while the SS patrol the pavement 2 feet away. She has mastered the art of high society invisibility. To the German officers, she is a trophy, a socialite, the charming wife of the wealthy industrialist Henri Fiocca. When she approaches a checkpoint, she doesn't offer a nervous smile. She offers a sharp, aristocratic wit. She complains about the heat or the lack of decent silk, using her voice to create a sensory distraction that bypasses their analytical defenses. The soldier doesn't see a courier carrying microfilm. He sees a beautiful woman who is far too important to be bothered with paperwork. But beneath the silk, the human spirit is vibrating with a cold, focused rage. Nancy wasn't born a spy. She was a witness. In 1933, she stood in the streets of Vienna and watched as Nazi thugs chained Jewish men and women to carts whipping them for the entertainment of the crowd. That was the eureka moment. While the experts in London and Washington were still debating the nuances of diplomacy, the journalist saw the pattern. She saw that the Reich wasn't a political movement, it was a plague. And she realized that if the system was built on the worship of strength, the only way to break it was to exploit its arrogance. The price on her head is now 5 million francs. It is a staggering sum, a number meant to turn every waiter, every neighbor, and every friend into a potential executioner. The tension in Marseille is tightening like a garrote. The Gestapo has begun to realize that the white mouse isn't a man. They are starting to suspect that the phantom is someone they've already met, someone they might have even held a door open for. Inside the headquarters, a major, a man who prides himself on the forensic accuracy of his department, scoffs at the latest reports. He looks at the map of Marseille, littered with red pins marking where the mouse was last seen. He treats these failures as mere clerical errors, a lack of discipline among the rank and file. He believes the machine is perfect. It is only the humans operating it who are flawed. She is a myth, he tells his subordinates, his voice dripping with the crystallized arrogance of a man who believes the manual of occupation is infallible. A woman cannot navigate a resistance network under our noses. It is a ghost story told by tired soldiers. He treats the silence of the city as his own success. But he has fatally underestimated his opponent. It isn't peace. It is the quiet before the steel screams. While the major stares at his maps, Nancy Wake is already in the dark, holding the silence that will eventually destroy him. The black box of the Gestapo's intelligence is about to fail. They have focused all their sensors on the loud, the obvious, and the masculine. They are looking for a wolf, while the mouse is already inside the walls, chewing through the wires. Nancy realizes the game of cat and mouse in Marseille is ending. The walls are closing in, and the socialite persona is wearing thin. To truly defeat the Reich, she knows she must stop being the ghost and become the hunter. She must leave the champagne behind for the grime of the forest. And the transition will be more brutal than anything the experts could have predicted. The silk is gone. The vermentino has been replaced by the metallic taste of well water and the grit of unwashed skin. June 1944. The Auvergne Mountains, central France. The landscape here is a jagged spine of volcanic rock and ancient forest, a place where the map ends and the insurgency begins. Nancy isn't just a soldier, she is a criminal in two worlds. By jumping back into France, she has signed her husband's death warrant, a treasonous gamble of a wife playing God with her partner's life. The SOE didn't just send her. They unleashed her into a theater where the regular military refused to go. To the London brass, she is a deniable asset, a suicide pact in a jumpsuit. If she is caught, the British will disavow her. If she survives, the French Maquis might kill her themselves just for being a woman who knows too much. Every step she takes through the Auvergne mud is a violation of the natural order. She is operating without a net, without a country, and without a prayer. Fueled by a cold, illegal rage that the official manuals don't have a name for. To the men of the Maquis, she is an anomaly. They are woodsmen, escaped prisoners, and vengeful farmers. They look at this woman sent from London, this Australian with the sharp eyes, and they see a liability. They don't see the 5 million franc bounty. They don't see the years of outsmarting the Gestapo. They see a lady in a man's war. But the system of the resistance doesn't care about gender. It cares about the fatal flaw of the enemy. The German army in the Auvergne is a massive, sluggish beast. It relies on the communication pivot. The input: an officer receives an encrypted radio code. The mechanical failure: without the physical code books, the encryption is an unbreakable wall. A lost code is a blind army. Output: if the resistance can intercept the new drops of British radio codes, they can coordinate 1,000 strikes at once. If they fail, they are just men with hunting rifles waiting to be slaughtered. The night is an obsidian shroud. Nancy leads a small band of guerrillas toward a clearing where a British drop is expected. The air is cold, smelling of pine needles and the damp, earthy rot of a forest that has seen too many centuries. Every snap of a twig sounds like a gunshot. The Maquis move with a frantic, nervous energy. They are brave, but they are loud. Nancy moves with the predatory silence of a creature that has lived in the shadows for years. She is the ghost in the machine. While the men argue in hushed, panicked whispers about the route, she is already 10 paces ahead, her hand raised to signal a halt. They are not alone. At the edge of the clearing, near the ruins of an old stone hut, a single SS sentry stands guard. He is a boy, perhaps 20, wrapped in a heavy wool coat. He is leaning against his rifle, bored, confident. He believes the forest is his. He has been told that the Maquis are bandits, disorganized cowards who run at the first sign of a uniform. He treats the darkness as a shield, believing that no one would dare approach a representative of the Reich. This is the crystallized arrogance of the occupier. The German High Command has issued a directive. The Maquis are a nuisance, not a threat. They lack the discipline of a true soldier. But he has fatally underestimated his opponent. It isn't a bandit in the bushes. It is the hammer. The sentry hears a soft rustle, like a bird shifting in its nest. He doesn't reach for his flare gun. He doesn't even straighten his posture. He smiles to himself, thinking of the warm barracks he'll return to in an hour. He treats the sound as an insignificance. But he is ignoring the terrifying reality of the forest. The boss, the raw, uncompromising physics of survival, is about to punish him. Nancy moves. There is no time for a blade. The flash of steel might catch a stray beam of moonlight. There is no time for a pistol. The crack of a shot would alert the battalion stationed 300 meters down the ridge. This is the moment where the socialite dies and the hunter is born. She utilizes the SOE's silent killings protocol. It is a technique stripped of all manual complexity. The action: a rapid approach to the target's blind spot. The mechanic: a focused, bone-shattering strike to the larynx, the human kill switch. The result: the windpipe collapses, the vocal cords are paralyzed, the sentry turns, and for a moment there is only silence. Then the steel screams in his throat. She strikes with a singular, brutal precision. It is the physics of a hammer hitting a glass rod. The boy's eyes widen, not with pain, but with the sudden, horrific realization that he cannot draw breath. He cannot scream. He cannot warn his brothers. He falls into the dirt, a silent heap of wool and arrogance, while Nancy stands over him, her breath steady, her heart a cold stone. The Maquis, hardened men who spent years romanticizing that glory of the kill stand in a paralyzed, shameful silence. There is no cheering, no slap on the back. As Nancy wipes the sentry's life from her hands, the guerrillas recoil. They look at her not with admiration, but with a visceral, sickening fear. They had mocked her for her gender, but now they are humiliated by her lack of hesitation. In that moonlit clearing, the system of masculine bravado collapses. The silence isn't respect. It's the sound of 100 egos shattering as they realize the lady they tried to protect is the only true killer among them. They can't look her in the eye because her gaze reflects their own cowardice back at them. The laughter, the skepticism, the lady labels, they all evaporate in the damp forest air. "Don't just stand there," she whispers, her voice like a sharpening stone. "Get the codes." As they retreat into the deep shadows with the canisters, the "yes, but" of the resistance begins to grind. They have the codes, but the sentry's body will be found at dawn. The system will react. The German beast will stop being sluggish and start being vengeful. Nancy knows that the kill was just the beginning. She has shed her humanity to save the Maquis' lives, but the forest is now a hornet's nest. The Reich will pour thousands of men into these mountains. They will burn villages. They will execute hostages, while the Maquis celebrate their small victory in a hidden cave. Nancy sits by a small shielded fire, cleaning the dirt from her fingernails. She is thinking of Marseille. She is thinking of Henri, her husband, whom she had to leave behind. She is thinking of the woman who used to drink champagne and laugh at the theater. That woman is a ghost now. The underdog has found her agency, but the cost is a debt that can never be repaid. She has become the master of the lethal hand-to-hand, the one who does what the experts in London only talk about. But as the sun begins to bleed over the horizon, she realizes the hardest part isn't the killing. It's what happens when the killing is over. The smoke of the Auvergne has cleared, but the air in London is no cleaner. It is a different kind of fog now, a heavy, coal-stained shroud that smells of victory and exhaustion. November 1945. The guns have fallen silent across the continent. The maps in the war rooms are being rolled up, and the experts are busy writing the official histories. For Nancy Wake, the transition from the white mouse back into the world of tea and small talk is a slow-motion collision. She walks through the street of a city that is rebuilding itself, but she is carrying a landscape inside her that can never be reconstructed. She is no longer a captain. She is no longer a hunter. The system, the same allied machine that gave her the Sten gun and the radio codes, now has a new set of instructions. Input: the war is over. The mechanical failure, the manual of peace, has no entry for a woman who is killed with her bare hands. It only knows how to categorize her as a wife, a widow, or a civilian. Output: the jagged edges of her courage are polished away, replaced by the smooth, safe narrative of a brave girl who helped the men win. The irony is a cold, piercing weight. Nancy returns to Marseille only to find that the human paradox has claimed its final, most devastating price. She discovers that Henri, the man who loved her enough to let her go, the industrialist who funded her escape, is dead. The Gestapo had found him. They had tortured him for months, demanding to know where the mouse was hiding. He had died in a cell, holding the silence that kept her alive. The victory is bitter. It tastes of ash and cheap gin. While she becomes the most decorated servicewoman of the Allied forces, earning the George Medal, the Resistance Medal, and the Croix de Guerre, she finds herself in a world that wants to pack her away into the quiet domesticity of the 1950s. The micro scene of the establishment's erasure plays out in a sterile office in Whitehall. Nancy sits across from a bureaucrat, a man who spent the war behind a desk, his uniform crisp and uncreased. He looks at her file with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. He sees the medals, but he cannot reconcile them with the woman sitting before him. "We are very grateful for your assistance in the French theater, Mrs. Wake," he says, his voice a perfect specimen of crystallized arrogance. He treats her combat record like a clerical error. But you must understand, the post-war world requires a certain stability. A woman who has seen such irregularity might find the civilian sector a bit overwhelming. He is prioritizing the manual of tradition over the truth of her sacrifice. He believes that because the war is over, the spirit that won it should simply evaporate. He offers her a life of quiet obscurity, a pension, and a pat on the head. But Nancy is not a creature of the domestic shelf. The bitter aftertaste begins to settle. She is celebrated in documentaries and books, but the reality of her life is a struggle for survival. She lives in a series of hotels, nursing her ghosts with a glass of whiskey in one hand and a cigarette in the other. She becomes a legend, but a legend that doesn't fit into the modern world's vision of a heroine. In a final act of weaponized irony, Nancy decides to sell her medals. She doesn't do it out of greed. She does it because she refuses to let her history be a dusty museum piece sitting in a drawer. "I am an Australian, and I like my drink," she tells a journalist years later, her voice still holding the sharp edge of the forest floor. "The medals didn't give me a pension. They didn't pay the rent. I'd rather have the money to live than a piece of tin that says I survived." It is a slap in the face to the system that decorated her, but failed to support her. It is the final retribution of the underdog. We are left to look at the wreckage of the 20th century and ask, in our rush to sanitize the past, do we forget the price of the human solution? We build monuments to the generals and the strategists, but we erase the jagged, uncomfortable truths of the people who actually did the work. We see this same hubris in our society today. We trust the massive system, the algorithms, the protocols, the institutional logic to keep us safe. We believe that if we follow the manual, the disaster can be avoided. But history whispers a different truth. The machine will always fail. The checkpoint will always be bypassed. The sentry will always fall asleep. The only thing that ever truly stands between us and the dark is the unpredictable individual, the woman who shouldn't be there, the outlier who refuses to follow the script. Nancy Wake died in 2011 at the age of 98. Her ashes were scattered in the woods of the Auvergne, back where the forest remembers the sound of her footsteps. She didn't leave behind a quiet legacy. She left behind a reminder that the price of our freedom was paid in blood, by people who were forced to lose their humanity just to keep ours intact. The white mouse is still out there, moving through the blind spots of our history books, waiting for us to realize that the most dangerous thing in the world is a person who has nothing left to lose but their courage. To help us uncover the rest of the story, please subscribe. If you believe that stories like Nancy Wake's deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing and leave a like. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.